there are many roles needed to make successful data products. An up-and-coming role is the analytics engineer. Our next guest will tell us all about this new role, how it differs from existing roles, and what the added value of the analytics engineer is. Here to talk about this are Stijn Tonk, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at GoDataFest. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Juan Perafan, you are an analytics consultant.
Correct.
Welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
So let's just dive right in. What is an analytics engineer?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What we see in a lot of companies is that, especially when you look into analytics in the business, it's still a big swamp out there of Excel files or SQL files that are kind of tied together, and they try to use it to do all kinds of analysis. And we really see a role for the analytics engineer to kind of drain this swamp and to bring some software engineering to the analytics world and make that more streamlined. So that's what we see that this engineer could achieve.
Right. So another way of saying that is that you want to provide data consumers, like analysts, with readily accessible, easy to use, and high quality data.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So how does the analytics engineer achieve this goal?
In order to achieve this goal, and maybe a really good way to understand this role is with the image that we see right here at the moment. For most people, when they want to cook something, it's just a matter of going to the closest Albert Heijn, getting the ingredients, and just cooking them. And many people actually forget that there is way too much behind all of that. There is a really big supply chain that makes sure that ultimately the products are very easy for you to consume. A successful analytics engineer strategy makes sure that your analyst, and in general every data consumer, also forgets that there is a lot of work behind the data that they're analyzing. Essentially, what we do is we take the very difficult things for some analysts, which are the engineering parts, testing the data, the performance, integrations, and all the way to making sure that the joins are correct. And we just lay the information there for people to be as easy to consume as just going to a supermarket and buying ingredients.
So you are basically talking about creating reliable production-grade data workflows that are well documented and
correct, and
excellent.
Very well tested and general maintainable.
So why? It's still not entirely clear to me. But why do I need this new role? Why can't I just hire a data engineer?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So what we see is that actually an analytics engineer and a data engineer have a different focus within the data ecosystem. To again fall back to the analogy of the supermarket, think about a big supermarket chain. You have all the local stores, but behind it is a big supply chain. And when we think about the data ecosystem and everything that comes to that, you can kind of compare it with the supply chain. And then when you think about a data engineer, this is kind of the person that builds up the infrastructure for the supply chain. If we think again in the analogy with the supermarket chain, this is the person who builds the warehouses, who makes sure that the producers of all the goods can somehow deliver their goods. They're stored somewhere and they're then distributed to the local stores. Where in our analogy, the analyst wants to just walk in and get the data sets that he or she needs and kind of cook the analysis that he or she wants to do.
Right.
So and here the analytics engineer comes in. This is the person that actually uses or kind of operates the supply chain and makes sure that this infrastructure is in place. But now all of these different products, they're distributed to the right store in the right amount with the right price, such that when an analyst comes in, he or she can just get what he or she needs to do the analysis. So they are kind of complementary to each other.
Right.
Indeed, and I also feel that the data engineer and the analytics engineer should know enough about the technical part and the engineering side to make it work. But a key difference is that the analytics engineer should also have some background in analyzing data, should know how it's like to open up something in Excel, in Tableau, in Power BI, and all of these other tools.
So these are things that a data engineer wouldn't touch.
Indeed.
Right.
He has to know more or less the things that people expect when they're analyzing.
Right. So I can also imagine that there are more skills and preferences that differ these two roles. Is there?
Yeah, so I think, of course, the word engineer is in there. So the key thing is that they should be great in engineering, but indeed there are different preferences. And for instance, when we look at our data engineers at GoData Driven, right, we see that there are a couple of tools that they don't really like. And I think you see the picture here of sushi, supermarket sushi. Well, that's not for everyone.
Yep.
And that is what some of these, the more IT engineering-minded people, they kind of dislike certain tools. For instance, Power BI or Tableau is not always liked because it's a bit less hardcore coding, but also a bit more graphical user interface. And I think these tools are really important. They are there, and the business can really start leveraging. So it's important that we also bring these kind of new tools to the business.
Yeah.
And I think that is where the analytics engineer comes in. I think. Yeah, analytics engineers may be a bit less picky about that it should be like really hardcore programming tools, but it can also be just useful tools that generate value to the business.
So this really falls in with the idea that there's increasing room for further specialization in the data domain.
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah, that's certainly. We see that the ecosystem is maturing. Where back in the day it was a lot about these big data infrastructures. It was really hard to roll out and set up. So then you need hardcore engineers that can really build this.
Yeah.
Then data science and machine learning came onto the scene. So now you see that machine learning engineers have their role in productionalizing all of these models and making sure they really can be used and are built in a sustainable way. And I think analytics engineers another role that has its room around ETLing and more focusing on data analytics, so more the front end of the whole data ecosystem.
Right.
Indeed, we focus around everything that helps data democratization in your organization. Well, you see the other types of engineers, they have generally different goals.
Yeah. So you already touched upon this a little bit, but can you just explain to me why it's so important for my organization to have an analytics engineer?
Yeah, I think it's one thing is really about is to increase the speed of delivery, right? So a lot of companies have invested in these infrastructures. They're working in integrating different data sources, making sure they land on some kind of data lake or a big data platform. But it's still hard for businesses to get really a positive ROI, so return of investment. And the analytics engineer is another role that can help you accelerate. You see this nice picture of Shinkansen over here. It's a piece of high-tech engineering that's running always on time, and it brings you at the place where you want to be really fast. And I think companies, they're kind of already looking into this for data science and machine learning. So they know maybe need a machine learning engineer, but analytics, it's still... Yeah, there's room to improve it, right? And now they have a bunch of all of these Excels and SQL files, and they're not really built in a sustainable way. It slows down the business in doing all of these kind of analysis. Yeah. And I think analytics engineers, can really bring the software engineering principles to this and make it all more efficient and improve your speed of delivery when it comes to these analysis.
Great. So I can imagine that this is the case for larger companies, but what if I'm a smaller company or a mid-sized company? Would I start out with an analytics engineer? Would I start with a data engineer? How would I choose that?
It really depends on your organization.
Right.
If the priority for you is make sure that everybody's able to use the data to make decisions, from the very technical people that can code, but also the people that have like 10 minutes a day and have no technical backgrounds, then probably an analytics engineer is a smart choice. I don't think it has to do with the size of the company, but rather on the focus.
Right, that makes sense. So what I gather from you is that the analytics engineer is really the role in the company to bridge the gap between business knowledge and data engineering. Yeah. So you have the analytics translator that kind of bridges this gap between doing your data science and putting the business in the driver's seat when it comes to that and bridging that gap.
And when we think about engineering, we also still see a gap there, and the analytics engineer can bridge that gap between kind of the data needs of the business, analytics needs of the business, and translate that to, okay, what does that mean for my data infrastructure? How do I make sure that I get up to par with my data availability and bridge that gap? Yeah.
Great. I think that brings us to the end of this chat. Stijn, Juan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
You're welcome.